Good evening everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're plunging into the heart of a medical nightmare, a story that transforms a place of healing into an abattoir of unspeakable horrors. Our journey takes us to a sprawling state-of-the-art hospital in the neon-drenched metropolis of Tokyo. It's a beacon of modern medicine, a place where life is saved and futures are restored. But within its sterile corridors and advanced operating theaters, a contagion of unknown origin is about to awaken. This isn't just a disease, it's a complete unraveling of biological law, a horrifying metamorphosis that will turn doctors, nurses, and the very patients they're sworn to protect into grotesque, violent monsters. As the infection takes hold, this monument to human ingenuity will become a nightmarish urban labyrinth, a concrete tomb where the line between life and death is not just blurred, but erased entirely. This is the story of a hospital that consumed itself, a terrifying chronicle of when the cure becomes the curse. The initial reports were subtle, easily dismissed as isolated incidents or the unfortunate side effects of aggressive treatments. It began in the intensive care unit, the ward for the most critically ill patient, recovering from complex organ transplant surgery, began exhibiting bizarre and alarming symptoms. His fever spiked uncontrollably, his skin developed a strange mottled gray pallor, and he thrashed in his bed with a strength that belied his weakened state. The attending physicians were baffled. Standard tests for known pathogens came back negative, and his body rejected every antiviral and antibiotic cocktail they administered. He spoke in guttural, nonsensical phrases, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a chilling, predatory focus. Then, during a routine check, he bit a nurse, sinking his teeth into her forearm with primal ferocity before a team of orderlies could sedate him. The nurse was treated for the bite wound and sent home to rest, but her ordeal was just beginning. Within hours she was racked with the same symptoms as her patient. A blinding migraine gave way to violent convulsions. Her husband, calling for an ambulance, could only watch in horror as her body seemed to contort, her joints popping at unnatural angles. By the time paramedics arrived, she was unrecognizable. Her skin was stretched taut over a rapidly changing bone structure, her jaw had unhinged, and a low, rattling growl emanated from deep within her chest. She was no longer a person. She was a thing driven by pure, unadulterated rage. The contagion had found its second host, and it was learning, adapting, and spreading with terrifying efficiency. Back at the hospital, chaos was quietly brewing. The initial patient had died, or rather, his body had ceased all recognizable biological functions before reanimating with violent force. Strapped to his bed, he had torn through his restraints, his muscles bulging with inhuman power. His skin had split open in several places, revealing a dark, pulsating tissue underneath. He was no longer a man but a grotesque mockery of one, a creature of sinew and bone and rage. His rampage was brief but devastating. He tore through the ICU, his movements impossibly fast and erratic. He fell upon another patient in the next bed, the sounds of snapping bone and tearing flesh echoing through the ward before the security team arrived. They were armed with tasers and batons, woefully unprepared for the nightmare they were about to confront. The creature barely flinched as the tasers hit, turning its vacant, furious eyes on the guards. The infection spread like wildfire through the hospital's circulatory system. A simple touch, a splash of blood, or even airborne particles in a sealed room seemed to be enough. Doctors performing an autopsy on one of the first victims were among the next to turn. In the middle of the sterile, brightly lit morgue, they suddenly dropped their instruments and began convulsing. Their colleagues watched, paralyzed with fear, as their bodies twisted and reshaped. The transformation was agonizing and swift. Bones audibly snapped and reformed, skin tore and sloughed away, and their screams of pain morphed into inhuman shrieks of aggression. They rose from the floor, no longer healers but monsters, and turned on the very people they had worked alongside just minutes before. The morgue, a place of quiet dignity for the deceased, became a feeding trough. As the contagion raced from floor to floor, the hospital's infrastructure began to fail. The internal communication systems went down first, flooded with panicked calls and then falling silent. The elevators ceased to function, trapping staff and patients on upper floors, or, even worse, between them. The building's automated security system, designed to contain fires or chemical spills, became an instrument of terror, with steel shutters slamming down and sealing off entire wings, turning corridors into inescapable traps. The hospital was no longer a single building but a series of interconnected prisons. Survivors found themselves isolated, listening to the horrifying sounds of the infected hunting in the hallways beyond the sealed doors. their guttural roars and the frantic screams of their victims creating a terrifying symphony of death. The hospital became a vertical labyrinth, a concrete and steel maze where every corner could hide a new form of horror. The infected were not all the same. The virus, or whatever it was, seemed to mutate its hosts based on their own physiology and environment. Nurses, quick and agile, became scuttling, spider-like hunters, their limbs elongated and bent at impossible angles, allowing them to crawl across ceilings and drop down on unsuspecting prey. Larger orderlies and security guards transformed into hulking brutes, their bodies swollen with tumorous muscle, capable of smashing through walls and tearing steel doors from their hinges. Even the patients became unique monstrosities. A man on dialysis became a bloated, fluid-filled creature that could spray corrosive, infectious liquid. A woman in the maternity ward. The less said about that, the better. The hospital was now a Barshan hellscape, a gallery of living, breathing nightmares. For the few who remained uninfected, survival was a desperate minute-by-minute struggle. A small group, led by a hardened senior surgeon named Dr. Arasaka and a resourceful young intern, Yui, tried to navigate the treacherous environment. Their medical knowledge was now useless. Scalpels and defibrillators became makeshift weapons. They moved through darkened service tunnels and ventilation shafts. The hospital they knew so intimately now a deadly alien landscape. The once familiar hum of medical equipment had been replaced by a chilling silence, punctuated by the wet, dragging sound of a nearby infected or the distant, blood-curdling scream of another life being extinguished. Trust was a luxury they couldn't afford, as the infection could be dormant, and a trusted colleague could transform into a slavering beast in the blink of an eye. Their goal was simple: reach the hospital's rooftop helipad. It was their only conceivable escape from the sealed-off building. But getting there meant ascending through the hospital's most dangerous, heavily infested zones. They fought their way through the pediatric ward, now a silent, haunting graveyard of small, abandoned beds. They traversed the surgical wing, where operating theaters had become feeding grounds, the bright overhead lights illuminating scenes of unimaginable carnage. With each floor they climbed, the horrors intensified. They saw things that would forever be seared into their minds, creatures that were once their friends and colleagues, now twisted into unrecognizable forms, driven by a singular, violent impulse. The line between life and death had vanished. It was only the hunter and the hunted. As they neared the top floors, they discovered the infection's horrifying epicenter, the hospital's advanced research laboratory. Here, they found evidence of a forbidden experiment, an attempt to create a regenerative compound capable of rebuilding damaged tissue and even regrowing entire limbs. The lead scientist, driven by a god complex, had pushed the boundaries of ethics and science, splicing human DNA with an unknown, extramephilic organism discovered deep within a volcanic vent. The resulting serum was not a miracle cure but a biological apocalypse. The initial outbreak wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate test on a terminally ill patient, a test that had spiraled catastrophically out of control. The very thing designed to perfect life had instead created a more efficient, more violent form of death. The final ascent to the roof was a desperate, bloody sprint. The remaining survivors were picked off one by one, falling victim to the relentless pursuit of the infected. Dr. Arasaka sacrificed himself, holding off a horde of creatures to give Yui a chance to reach the roof access ladder. She scrambled up, her hands bloody and her body bruised, bursting out onto the rooftop into the cold Tokyo night air. Below her, the city glittered, oblivious to the concentrated hell contained within the hospital's walls. But her relief was short-lived. The final horror awaited her. The lead scientist, the architect of this nightmare, had administered a perfected version of the serum to himself. He stood before her, a towering, chitinous monstrosity, a fusion of man and insectoid horror, his intellect intact but now warped by pure malevolence. He was the alpha, the hive mind of the infection. The final battle for survival, for the fate of the city itself, would take place on that rooftop, high above the sleeping metropolis. And that's where our story ends for this evening. A place of healing twisted into a charnel house. A testament to the terrifying consequences of playing God. The hospital, once a symbol of hope, became a quarantined tomb. Its horrors sealed within, a permanent, silent monument to a biological apocalypse in the heart of Tokyo. The line between life and death, so clear and defined, was horrifically erased, leaving only a brutal, nightmarish struggle for survival. As always, I'd like to thank you for joining me on this journey into the dark. It's a stark reminder that sometimes, the greatest monsters are the ones we create ourselves. I'll see you all again next week for another exploration of the shadows. Until then, stay safe, and good night.